Let me tell you what 58 looks like when your world falls apart. It looks like standing in your own kitchen on a Wednesday evening, holding a casserole dish you just pulled from the oven, while your husband of 31 years sits down at the table and tells you he's in love with someone else. It looks like the way the room goes completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. It looks like setting the casserole dish down very carefully because some part of your brain is still functioning on autopilot, and then sitting down across from him and asking, in a voice you don't recognize as your own, how long? 8 months, he said. She's 34, he said. I think I need to follow my heart, he said. I was 58 years old. I had given that man 31 years of my life. I had raised his children, supported his career, built a home with him, grown old with him, or so I thought. And in the space of one Wednesday evening, I became a woman whose husband had left her for someone younger. A cliché. I refused to stay one. What happened over the next 7 years was the most painful, most difficult, most transformative journey of my entire life. And what happened when he came back? Well, that's the part you're really here for. My name is Margaret Elaine Calloway, Maggie to everyone who knows me, and I am 65 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, in a house that I own outright, that I chose myself, that has my name and only my name on the deed. I want to tell you my story from the beginning, because the ending only makes sense if you understand where I started. I was born and raised in Augusta, Georgia, the second of 4 children in a loud, loving, complicated Southern family. My father was a pharmacist. My mother taught piano lessons from our living room every afternoon after school. We were not rich, but we were warm, and warmth, I learned early, matters more than money. I met Richard Calloway in the fall of 1984. I was 22 years old, fresh out of the University of Georgia, with a degree in English literature, working as an editorial assistant at a small regional publishing house in Augusta. Richard was 26, handsome in that easy, confident way that certain men carry without effort, working as a junior architect at a firm downtown. He walked into a bookstore where I was browsing on a Saturday afternoon, reached past me for a copy of A Farewell to Arms, and said, I am not making this up, good choice. Hemingway understood loss better than almost anyone. I turned around and said, he also understood running away from things. Richard laughed. We talked for 2 hours. He asked for my number. We were married 2 years later, in June of 1986, in my parents' backyard under a canopy of white lights, with my mother playing piano and my sisters crying and my father squeezing my hand at the altar and whispering, You sure about this? Maggie Bird? I was sure. For a long time, I had every reason to be. Let me tell you what 31 years looks like when they're good. They look like 2 children, Claire, born in 1989, and Thomas, born in 1992, who filled our house in Savannah with noise and mess, and the particular chaos of a life being fully lived. They look like Richard's architecture firm growing from 3 employees to 40, and my own career shifting from editorial work to teaching high school English, a job I loved with a devotion that surprised even me. They look like Sunday morning pancakes and summer vacations to the North Carolina mountains, and the kind of marriage that isn't perfect, but is real, built on genuine friendship and shared history and the quiet comfort of knowing someone completely. Were there hard years? Yes. When Richard's firm nearly went under in 2008, and we worried about money for the first time in our marriage. When my mother died in 2011, and I grieved in ways I hadn't expected. When Claire went through a difficult divorce in 2015, and we spent months trying to support her without taking sides. But we got through all of it. Together. That's what I believed. That's what I thought we were, people who got through things together. I was not paying attention to the right things. In the spring of 2017, Richard began working on a major residential development project, a luxury housing community outside of Savannah, his firm's largest contract in years. It required long hours, frequent site visits, and collaboration with a team of younger architects and project managers. One of those project managers was a woman named Brooke Weston. She was 34 years old. She was, by all accounts, brilliant at her job. And she was, apparently, everything Richard decided he had been missing. I noticed changes in him before I understood what they meant. He was distracted. He started going to the gym, which he hadn't done in years. He bought new clothes without mentioning it. He was on his phone more, and when I walked into a room, the phone went face down. I noticed all of these things, and I told myself stories about them. Work stress. Mid-project anxiety. The pressure of a big contract. I did not tell myself the true story, because the true story was one I did not want to know. The Wednesday came in October of 2017. I had made his favorite dinner, chicken and rice casserole, something his mother used to make, something I had been making for him for 3 decades. I had set the table. I had opened a bottle of wine. He sat down and told me he was in love with someone else. I asked how long. 8 months. She's 34. I think I need to follow my heart. I sat at that table for a very long time after he finished talking. The casserole got cold. The wine sat untouched. Outside, the sun finished setting and the kitchen went dark and neither of us moved to turn on a light. Then I stood up, turned on the light, covered the casserole, put the wine in the refrigerator and said, "I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight." He did. 3 weeks later, he moved out. I want to be honest about this part, because too many stories skip it. I fell apart. Not dramatically, not publicly. I was 58 years old, and I had too much dignity for dramatic. But privately, behind the closed door of the house we had shared for 23 years, in the bedroom that still smelled like him for weeks after he left, I fell apart completely. I cried every morning in the shower, because the shower was the one place I had given myself permission to fall apart without worrying about who might see. I lost 12 pounds in 2 months, because I simply forgot to eat real meals. I went through the motions of teaching, standing at the front of a classroom, teaching Fitzgerald and Morrison and Faulkner, talking about love and loss and the American experience, while my own life was doing something I didn't have words for yet. My daughter Claire called every day. She was furious at her father in the clean, uncomplicated way that adult children can sometimes be furious on behalf of a parent they love. My son Thomas was quieter about it, more like me, but he drove down from Atlanta twice in the first 3 months, just to sit with me. Not to fix anything. Just to be there. I raised that boy right. My friends, Diane and Ruth and Carol, women I had known for 20 and 30 years, showed up in the specific ways that old female friendships show up in a crisis. Diane brought food. Ruth came over on Friday nights with wine and terrible reality television. Carol, who had been through her own divorce 15 years earlier, sat with me one afternoon and said something I have never forgotten. "Maggie, the grief you're feeling right now is real. Grieve it. But don't let it be the last chapter. You are not the woman he left. You are the woman who decides what comes next." I held on to those words like a rope in deep water. The divorce was finalized in September of 2018. Richard and I split the assets, the house, the retirement accounts, the savings, as equitably as our attorneys could manage. I kept the house initially, then sold it 18 months later when I realized I didn't want to live in those rooms anymore. I wasn't running away. I was choosing something new. I bought a smaller house in the historic district of Savannah. 4 rooms, a front porch with rocking chairs, a garden in the back. Mine. Here is what I want to tell every woman who is reading this, or watching this at whatever age you are, but especially if you are in your late 50s, and you feel like the story is over. The story is not over. The rebuilding was not fast, and it was not linear, and there were setbacks and bad days and moments where I wondered if the best parts of my life were genuinely behind me. I will not pretend otherwise. But I also discovered things about myself in those years that I could not have discovered any other way. I had been an English teacher for 22 years. In all that time, I had wanted to write, not teach writing, but actually write, for myself, the way I had dreamed about in my 20s. Richard had always been vaguely supportive in the way that people are vaguely supportive of things they don't think will actually happen. Sure, Maggie, someday. When you retire, maybe. You're so busy with the kids. The kids were grown. I wasn't busy with them anymore. At 60 years old, I started writing. Not a great novel. Not immediately. I started with essays, personal essays about teaching, about marriage, about loss, about Savannah, about the particular experience of being a woman in her 60s figuring out who she was when the role she had played for 30 years was suddenly gone. I submitted one to a small literary journal on a Tuesday night with a glass of wine and the specific courage of someone who has decided she has nothing left to lose. They published it. Then another journal published another one. Then a literary agent, a woman in New York named Sandra Voss, read one of my essays in an online magazine and sent me an email asking if I had ever considered writing a book. I sat at my kitchen table and read that email 3 times. Then I called Diane and said, "You are not going to believe this." I wrote the book over 18 months. A memoir-adjacent collection of essays about the second half of life, about reinvention, about grief, about what it means to build something new at an age when the culture tells you the building is done. It was published by a small, but respected independent press in the spring of 2023. It was called Still Standing: Notes from the Second Half. It did not become a bestseller. I am not going to tell you that story, because it is not that story. What it did was find its readers, women in their 50s and 60s and 70s who read it and wrote me letters. Actual handwritten letters, saying things like, "I thought I was the only one and you gave me permission to start over," and "I read this and called my daughter and told her I loved her." Those letters meant more to me than any bestseller list. Meanwhile, I retired from teaching at 62, earlier than I had planned, but the book advance, modest as it was, gave me just enough cushion and began building a small, but genuine second career as a writer and occasional speaker. I gave talks at women's conferences and book clubs and libraries. I taught a writing workshop for women over 50 at the Savannah Community Center on Tuesday mornings. I traveled alone for the first time in my life, to Ireland, to Portugal, to New Mexico. I learned that I was remarkably good company for myself, which was information I had not previously had. I made new friends. I deepened old ones. I had a brief, tender relationship with a widower named James who lived 2 streets over and walked his golden retriever past my porch every morning. It didn't last, we wanted different things, ultimately, but it was kind and genuine, and it taught me that I was still capable of opening up to someone, which was something I had genuinely wondered about. At 65, I was not the woman who had stood in that kitchen holding a casserole dish. I was someone I liked considerably better. It was a Sunday morning in March, 2 months ago. I was on my back porch with my coffee and a manuscript I was reviewing, a student's essay from my writing workshop, when my phone rang. The name on the screen was one I had not seen in years. Richard Calloway. I looked at it for a long moment. The coffee steamed. A mockingbird was doing something complicated in the magnolia tree at the back of my garden. I answered. He sounded older. Of course he did. We were both older. His voice had that quality that voices get in their mid-60s, a little slower, a little more careful. He asked how I was. I said I was well. He asked about Claire and Thomas. I said they were fine and that he was welcome to call them directly, which he knew. Then there was a pause, and he said, "Maggie, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. About us. About what I threw away." I waited. He said that things with Brooke had ended. In fact, 3 years after they began, when Brooke decided she wanted children and Richard, at 65, did not. He said he had been alone since then. He said he had done a lot of thinking. He said he had realized, over these years, that what he had with me was something he had not understood the value of until it was gone. He said he missed me. He said he wanted to know if there was any possibility, any at all of us finding our way back to each other. I sat with the phone against my ear and I listened to all of it. And when he finished, I took a breath, and I said what I had, perhaps, always known I would say if this moment ever came. I said, "Richard, I'm going to be honest with you, because honesty is something I've learned to value more than almost anything else in these last 7 years." I said, "I don't doubt that you mean what you're saying. I don't doubt that you've thought about this. I don't even doubt that you're lonely, or that you miss what we had." I said, "But here's what I need you to understand. The woman you left at 58, I'm not her anymore. And the life I've built since you left is not a consolation prize. It's not me making the best of things. It's genuinely, deeply mine in a way that our life together never fully was. Because in our life together, I was always also yours. And I didn't know what it felt like to be only my own until you left." He was quiet. I said, "You leaving broke something in me. I will not pretend it didn't. But what grew in the space where that broken thing was, I would not trade it for anything. Not even for going back." He said, "So that's it? There's no possibility?" I said, "I wish you well, Richard. I genuinely do. I hope you find what you're looking for. But what you're looking for is not me, not anymore. What you're looking for is the woman I used to be, and she's gone. She became someone else." He said, very quietly, "She sounds remarkable." I said, "She is." And I said goodbye. And I hung up. And I sat on my back porch for a very long time, listening to that mockingbird in the magnolia tree, feeling something I could only describe as complete. I am 65 years old. I have a house I love and a garden I tend and a book with my name on the cover and a Tuesday morning writing workshop full of women who are discovering that their stories are not over. I have a daughter who calls me every Sunday and a son who visits every few months and leaves my refrigerator stocked with things I didn't ask for. I have Diane and Ruth and Carol who have been my people through everything. I have a porch with rocking chairs where I drink my coffee every morning and watch the light change over the historic district rooftops of Savannah. I have, at 65, a life that is so fully and completely mine that sometimes I sit in the middle of it and feel something close to gratitude, even for the Wednesday, even for the casserole going cold, even for the years of rebuilding. Because without all of that, I would not be here. And here is a very good place to be. Richard Calloway left me at 58 for a younger woman. She left him too, eventually. And I became someone neither of us expected. If you are in the middle of it right now, the falling apart part, the rebuilding part, the part where you don't know yet who you're becoming, I want you to hear this. You are not finished. The life that's waiting for you on the other side of this loss is not a smaller life. It might be the biggest one you've ever had. Go find out. New story every day on Justice Served Tales. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the best chapters are sometimes the ones you never planned for.